Greetings everyone, my name is Michael McCann and welcome to this Wayward Art Company tutorial on creating a custom wood shader in Blender. I'll first demonstrate how to make this procedural wood texture and then set up a node group into a shader so that you can really easily customize whether you want a wood floor texture or perhaps wood planks, and then various other options to customize the look, the color, the scaling, and just a variety of other options. I'll start by deleting my default cube and adding a plane, and switching over to Cycles Render. Now I'll go to my compositing window so that I have access to my node editor. Now I'm going to switch my world background to black, and I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion so that I can clearly see the texture as I'm creating it. So I can now give this plane a new material. And I'll type Shift A and add Glossy Shader. And then combine these two together. Now I'll type Shift A and choose Texture, Noise Texture. And then plug the factor into the color of the diffuse shader. Now with the noise texture selected, I'll hit Control T, and that adds the mapping and texture coordinate node. And I will also add a converter color ramp. And so the color ramp needs a lot of these different markers. I'm going to add 9 in total. And they need to alternate between black and white. So the first one will be black, the second one white, the third one black, and so on. And you can see now that the texture is starting to take on sort of a marble-like appearance. So now with this color ramp selected, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it and then just drop it in. And you can see that that distortion has doubled. So in order to make it look a little more like wood grain, I'm going to take the detail all the way up to 16 and give the distortion a value of 0.2. And then on the mapping node, take the scaling on the x-axis to 8. And that sort of stretches it out. And you can see that that's starting to look a little like wood grain now. But we need to change the color, and we're going to do that with the second color ramp. So I'll select this first tab, and I'll give it sort of a dark brown, because this will be the color of the wood grain. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'll hover over this color and hit Control C. And that copies it, and then I can use Control V to paste it into each one of these black tabs. And I'll also paste that color into the first white tab, and then select it, and then just choose a little bit of a lighter value. Something like that looks pretty good. So I'll Control C to copy that, and then again use Control V to paste that into each of these white values. You don't really want to use too much of a variety of color here because it will look weird. If you don't believe me, just try it. But I do like to use a little bit of color variation. So maybe I'll select this middle one, this middle dark one, and I'll just adjust the value a little darker. And you can see that that sort of shows up in there. Some of those wood grains are a little darker. And I'll select one of the lighter ones, and I'll just make that value a little lighter. But too much variation in there really starts to look weird. So that's the base texture for the wood done. So I can just move this out to the side. But I still want to add a way that I can customize the overall look of the wood. And to do that, I'm going to type Shift A and add a color, hue, saturation, and value. And I don't really see a lot of use for the hue, actually. It just sort of changes the color of it pretty drastically. So I won't wind up adding this to the node group. But the saturation and the value, together, they can help to create the effect of like a wood stain or a wood finish that's really customizable, some really cool effects. So that will definitely be added to the shader. Alright, so now I'll add a Shift A vector bump node and plug this into the normal on the diffuse and glossy shaders. And take the color from the color ramp and plug it into the height. You can see that makes it really bumpy, so I can just take the strength down. I'm going to set it really low. At least to start. Okay, so you can see that adds a little bit of bump. So now I can start working on the wood planks. So I'll type Shift A and go to Texture, Wave Texture. And I'll drop this in right underneath of the noise texture. And hit Control T to add the mapping and texture coordinates. Now I'll type Shift A and go to Color and Mix RGB and drop this in between the color ramp and the hue, saturation, and value. And plug in the wave texture and set it to multiply and take the value slider all the way up. And also plug that into the bump because we want those lines for the wood planks to also be affected. So you can see it looks a little weird right now, so we just need to rotate this on Z 45 degrees. And now it follows along with the wood grain. And in order to make those lines thinner, I'm going to go to Converter and add a color ramp. And then just slide the white all the way back until it's practically over top of the black. And you can see that that thins out those lines. And you can see also that the bump is affected by it. But so currently the specularity is showing in between the cracks, which is a little weird. Those lines should be just black without any specularity, and we'll do that at the very end after we're done adding the floor texture in as well. We'll work on the specularity. I think I'm going to take the scale of the wood down a little so that it's in better proportion to the wood planks. So 2.5, that looks pretty good. I apologize if you can hear all the traffic. I'm sure that you can. My USB mic picks up everything. It picks up every noise. So if it's distracting, my apologies. Okay, so now we'll work on the wood floor. So I'll type Shift A and go to Texture and select Brick Texture. And once again, Control T for the mapping and texture coordinates. Now I'm going to duplicate this Mix RGB node and plug the brick texture into the second color slot. And the wood texture, this color ramp, will get plugged into the first slot. And now I'll duplicate this again, but set it back from multiply to mix. And I'll use this to just combine those two multiply nodes, or the mix RGB nodes set to multiply. Okay. So now this mix node will switch it between the wood planks or the wood floor texture really quickly. But we need to make the wood floor look a little better, so we'll rotate it on Z 90 degrees. And I want to take the mortar, which is those black lines. I want to change that to 0.001. And then change the row height to just 0.1. And the brick width to 1. And that's a pretty convincing wood floor texture. What I like about it the most is these two color values on the brick texture. What they're essentially doing is assigning some of this color to some of these planks, and the gray color is getting assigned to other planks. And this bias here sort of sets a variety of different values between those two colors, so that you end up with a lot of different colored wood planks, which is very cool. I'm going to move this light over top of the plane now so I can work on the specularity. As you can see, the cracks are still specular for the wood floor and the wood planks. So we want to get rid of that. And the way I can do that is with this mix RGB node that switches between the wood floor and the planks. I can just plug this color directly into the mix shader of the diffuse and glossy shaders. Now I'm going to add a converter RGB to black and white. And then another mix RGB node. And I'll set this color to black. And now with the slider all the way up, there's no specularity, and if I move it down, you can see that there is specularity. I'll perhaps tweak this roughness a little so that you can see it a little more clearly. There we go. So now if I adjust the slider, you can see that you can tweak the value of that specularity, and there's no specularity in the cracks of the wood floor or the planks. And I think now that this is pretty much done, so I'm going to select all of these nodes and then just deselect this last one here, the material output, and hit Control G. And that's going to make this into a node group. And you see now we have this different editing window. And as you can see, we have these two nodes on each side of our node group that have a yellow header. And these are what will determine what inputs and outputs our node group has. So you can see if we tab out of the edit mode, you can see our node shader is just this one single little node with nothing much to it. So I want to add some more outputs first, because this will be really easy. So I want to select the output from the diffuse shader and the glossy shader, and I can label those over here in the output section. So now you see if I tab back out of edit mode, you see that those outputs are there on the shader itself. And we can change the name of this now too. I'll just call it wood shader. Okay, so we'll tab back into edit mode and we'll start working on the inputs. So whatever I plug this node into will then appear on that shader. So the scale of the wood, that's important. So I'll just call this wood scale. Next, we want those saturation and value sliders to easily customize the look of the wood itself. And as you can see, each time you plug something into the shader, it creates another port underneath of it. And we can just leave those named saturation and value. I think that that's fine. Next, I'm going to add this slider, which will slide between the wood planks and the wood floor. And I'll just call that one planks/floor. So now let's see what this looks like out of edit mode. Yeah, so really easily right now with one slider we can switch this between planks and floors, which is really cool. But what if we wanted just to have wood without the planks or without the floorboards? Well, the only way I can think to do that is to plug this into each of the value sliders on these mix RGB nodes. And that way you can just adjust or remove all of the strength of the planks or the floorboards. So I'll just call this first one plank strength, and the second one I'll call floor strength. And so right now, since it's set to plank, I can just take the plank strength all the way down and you just have the wood. And if this were set to floor, you would just have to, remove the floor strength or take the floor strength value down. Seems maybe a little like an overly complicated way of doing it, but again, it's really the only way I can perceive doing it with this node setup. So now I want to plug one into the scale of the wave texture so that I can create, larger or smaller, wood planks. So I'll just call this plank scale. And if you wanted, you could plug another one into the distortion on the wave texture, which just creates some waviness in those planks. It's kind of cool. I'm not going to use it, but depending on how frequently you think you would use that feature, maybe you could add it to yours. But I do want to plug it into the scale on the brick texture so that we can scale up the size of the wood floor really easily. And I also want to plug this into each of the color slots on the brick texture so that you can customize the look of the wood floor. I find that almost always I need to tweak this a little so that, depending on, if you're doing an interior render, you'll almost always need to coordinate the color a little bit with the rest of the room. So that's very important. So next, I guess all that's left really is the bump and the specularity. So I'll plug this one into the strength on the bump node. Call this bump strength. Okay, and plug this into the value slider on the mix RGB, which controls the strength of the specularity. So this will be called spec strength, and then another one will go into the roughness on the glossy shader. Okay, so I think that's it. I think that the shader is done now. So just to go over what this does again really quickly, you can adjust the actual size of the wood grain. The saturation and value sliders can help to customize certain wood stained effects. And here you can easily switch between the planks or the floorboards. You can scale the size of the planks. And of course, scale the size of the floorboards. Here you can tweak the color of the floorboards, which is again really useful. If I just add a little bit of red and I darken it up a little, I can create this sort of a cherry stain for the floor. So it's really cool to customize it. And then of course you can strengthen the bump or the specularity strength or roughness. So after you save this and you want to just import this into a new scene to use on a new object, it's really easy to do. You can just open Blender and say I want to apply it to this cube. Well, all I need to do is first switch over to Cycles, and now I'll go to File, Append, and then I'll find that blend file and select Node Tree. And then there's the wood shader. So now if I give this cube a new material, I can type Shift A and select Group, and there's Wood Shader. Now I'll plug this directly into the surface. But you can see that because the texture coordinates on all of those textures are generated, looking at this cube from the top, it looks perfectly normal. But if you turn and look at it from any other side, you can see various different problems depending on which side you're looking at it. So what you would need to do is just go into edit mode and switch all of these to UV coordinates. And then tab into edit mode and UV unwrap your object. And now you can see that it's applied exactly however you choose to UV unwrap. And the final thing that I'll do is I'll give this node a color so that it reflects what the actual material is. So I'll just come in and change it to a light brown. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please share. I'm always very grateful for that. And I will see you the next time. Thanks for watching.